Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. Such a night. It's Wednesday, and we are completing Tractate Sukkah, the 7th volume of the Talmud. We are on page 56. We're going to make a SIYUM, a little celebration. We'll recite the Hadran afterward, and then we'll read just a couple of words from the next tractate, because every time we finish a tractate, we want to start the next one. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we complete a tractate and do some beautiful learning together on a Wednesday night? Stephen in New Hampshire, Nancy, North Carolina, Patrice in Utah, Yehudit wishing everybody congratulations on completing Tractate Sukkah. It's very satisfying to belong to such a wonderful group to study Talmud with. Thank you for your dedication, Nina and Sal. Thank you, Yehudit, for being such an important part of the community. Paula in Chicago, Tom says shalom. Belle in Shelbyville, Lucy in Minnesota, Sharon in New Jersey, James in Indianapolis, John in Maine, PK in Colorado, the other Paula in the Great Northwest, Francisco in Placerville, Renee in Indiana, Dorothy in Pittsburgh, Christo in Lubbock, Melissa in Great Neck, Jean in Valley Village, Rebecca in LA, excuse me. Sharon, we are getting the ends of Ida with rain and flooding here. Hope we keep internet and may you stay dry and safe. Angela in New York, Bill in Missouri, Chaim says Mazel Tov over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Georgia, and Seraphim in Sacramento, right? Welcome everybody. It's Elul. Let's blow the shofar. Tonight's episode of AT Daily is dedicated by Jean and Michael Schechter for the healing of Jean's sister, Julie. May we only hear good news. May Julie have a complete and speedy recovery. And Jean, may you and Michael and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say amen. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people by sponsoring an episode of AT Daily. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, go to accidentaltalmudist.org and you'll see how to do it. Where am I? Okay, here we go. The last page of Tractate Sukkah. We are in chapter 5. We'll be completing our discussion of the 5th Mishna and opening and completing our discussion of the 6th Mishna. Okay, right near at the bottom of the B side of 55, the very bottom, the Mishnah continues. And in the distribution of the showbread on the 3 pilgrimage festivals, all 24 priestly watches have equal status. So the showbreads were the unleavened but yet very thick breads that were baked by a special family that had the recipe for it. We talked about that. And then they would replace the previous week's showbreads on Shabbos. And then they would be eaten by one of those watches, who are also being replaced by the next watch. The priestly watches, meaning all of the Kohanim, were divided into 24 families, basically, sort of lead families. And then the Kohanim who served in the temple, who I believe had to be between 20 and 50 years of age to be qualified, would serve for a week at a time. There were 24 watches, so they would do 2 weeks a year, plus they would all serve during the pilgrimage festivals. And now we're talking about how, the weekly, your schedule of serving twice a year for a week plus serving during festivals would intersect with the festivals, how the regular service of the priests intersected with their special service during festivals. the special service because so many people were coming up to Jerusalem and bringing offerings. They needed a lot more priests serving in the temple when the temple stood. So the sages taught, from where is it derived that all of the priestly watches, these groups of priests, have equal status in the distribution of the showbread on Shabbos? Right, the showbreads, there were 12 showbreads, cooked, baked in a special way, folded in a special way, and they would sit on that golden table, the shulchan, the table for the showbreads, inside the sanctuary near the menorah, the golden candelabra that was also in the sanctuary. So from where is it derived that all of the priestly watches have equal status in the distribution of the showbread? And the verse states, they shall have like portions to eat, Deuteronomy 18:8. Just as all the watches receive an equal portion of the service, that's why it's divided over the course of the year. They each get a week at a time and twice a year. So just as all the watches receive an equal portion of the service, so too all of the watches receive an equal portion in the eating. And the Gemara asks, what is the eating that's mentioned in this verse? If you say it is the eating of the offerings, the verse is superfluous because certain kinds of offering, recall that there are different kinds of sacrifices that were brought in the temple. An olah, for example, an elevation offering, was slaughtered and then consumed entirely on the altar. But a sin offering, part of it was consumed on the altar, part of it was given to the priest. For certain other offerings, the hide of the animal was given to the priest. So there was the priestly portion of certain offerings that they ate. So is that what is referred to as the eating in this service? So what is the eating mentioned in the verse? If you say it is the eating of the offerings, the verse is superfluous, as it is derived from there at Leviticus 7:9, and every meal offering shall be the priest's that offers it, which, although it was written with regard to meal offerings, actually applies to all offerings that have a portion eaten by the priests. Moreover, it teaches that a priest who participates in the sacrifice of the offering shares in eating the offering. Rather, the verse is referring to the showbread that was not part of the service this Shabbos. It was baked the previous Shabbos. Now, one might have thought that all the watches should be equal, even with regard to obligations that come not due to the festival, but are brought on the festival nevertheless, as there were many vow offerings and free will offerings brought to the temple that were not part of the festival rite, but simply the result of people taking advantage of their presence in Jerusalem during a pilgrimage festival to fulfill their outstanding obligations. Like a person might have said, if such and such a thing goes well for me in my life, God, I vow that I will bring a special offering to the temple. And so it went right for them. Now they have to fulfill their vow. And very often they'll wait till the next time they're in Jerusalem, the next time there's a pilgrimage festival. And so there were many of these offerings being brought. These are not offerings that are particular to Sukkot, but because the people are in Jerusalem in Sukkot, many of them were brought at that time. Therefore, the verse states, Deuteronomy 18:8, besides the transactions of their fathers' houses. What did the forefathers of each watch, these priestly groups, sell each other? What did they sell each other? They agreed with regard to the service of the watches. I will serve during my week and you will serve during your week. They divided up the service of the Kohanim, of the priests, over the course of the year with this kind of organizational system. Each watch has the right to perform the temple service during its appointed weeks and to receive all priestly gifts that are offered during those weeks. Skip a few paragraphs. The Gemara elaborates. Rav said that one recites the blessing of... Hold on. I'm not going to skip this paragraph because it sets this up. So the Mishna continues. On Shavuos, that coincides with Shabbos, the priest charged with the distribution says to each priest. Now here, what they were talking about is on Shavuos, In addition to the showbreads, which would be distributed every Shabbos to the priests that were serving there, there was also the special offering of the 2 loaves of bread, wheat bread, that are brought on Shavuos. If that happens to be on Shabbos, those 2 loaves, after they're offered, they actually get eaten by the priest. They get to eat from that. That wheat bread is leavened bread, as opposed to the showbreads that are there every week, which are unleavened bread. So the question that's going to be asked is, well, which do they eat first and why? So on Shavuos, that coincides with Shabbos, the priest charged with the distribution says to each priest, here is matzah, unleavened bread, from the showbread for you, and here is leavened bread from the 2 loaves of Shavuos for you. It was stated that there is a dispute between the Amoraim, the priest, the sages of the Gemara, and Rav said, when one enters the sukkah, he recites. So now they're talking about which do you do first. So Rav is going to give as an example of how we do things on Sukkot to help us understand which bread should be eaten first. So Rav said, when one enters the sukkah, he recites the blessing of the sukkah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who made us holy through his commandments and has commanded us to sit in the sukkah. And then one says the blessing of time, the Shechachianu. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sustained us and enabled us to reach this season, that we're still alive and able to celebrate this festival. That's Shechachianu, who has given us life, sustained us, and brought us to this time. Rabba Bar Bar Chana said, one recites the blessing of Shechachianu first, and then the blessing of Sukkah. And the Gemara elaborates. Rav said that one recites the blessing of Sukkah and then the Shechachianu because the obligation of the day takes precedence. Meaning, the blessing over residing in the Sukkah, you only say during Sukkot, and now it's Sukkot, so you say that blessing first. Shechachianu, you say on all the festivals, so it gets said more often than the blessing of dwelling in the Sukkah. So Rav is saying, well, we should say the blessing that's special to Sukkot first, and then we'll say the Shechachianu that we also say at other times of the year. Rabba Bar Bar Chana said that one recites the blessing of time, Shechachianu, and then the blessing of the Sukkah. Because when a frequent practice and an infrequent practice clash, the frequent practice takes precedence over the infrequent practice, and the blessing of time is recited more frequently. The Gemara suggests, let us say that Rav and Rabba Bar Bar Chana disagree in the dispute of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So we're going to trace their dispute to an earlier dispute between the followers of Shammai and the followers of Hillel. As the sages taught in a Baraisa, these are the matters of dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel with regard to the laws of a meal. Beis Shammai say, when one recites Kiddush over wine, he recites a blessing over the sanctification of the day, and then recites a blessing over the wine. And Beis Hillel say, one recites a blessing over the wine, and then a blessing over the day. And the Gemara elaborates, Beis Shammai say, one recites a blessing over the sanctification of the day, and then recites a blessing over the wine, as the day causes the wine to come before the meal, right? It's because, for example, when we make Kiddush on Friday nights, normally we just have wine with our meal. But now we're using wine for the special ceremony of sanctifying Friday night, of making a Kiddush to separate us, right, from the regular week. Now we're having a special Friday night meal because it's Shabbos and we're going to make Kiddush over it. So the reason we're drinking the wine in its own ceremony before the meal is because it's Shabbos, right? So Beis Shammai say we recite the blessing over sanctifying Shabbos and then over the wine because it's the fact that it's Shabbos that causes us to drink the wine before the meal. And Beis Shammai offer an additional reason. The day has already been sanctified and the wine has not yet come. Since Shabbos was sanctified first, Shabbos already began after all, it should likewise be mentioned first. And Beis Hillel say one recites a blessing over the wine and then recites a blessing over the day, as the wine causes the Kiddush to be recited. Were there no wine, Kiddush would not be recited. Alternatively, Beis Hillel say the blessing over wine is recited frequently and the blessing over the day is not recited frequently. And when a frequent practice and an infrequent practice clash, the frequent practice takes precedence over the infrequent practice. So what is the law about this? The order of blessings in Kiddush during Sukkot. The order of the blessings in Kiddush during Sukkot is: the blessing over the wine is recited first, followed by the sanctification of the day. Then one recites the blessing for dwelling in the Sukkah, followed by the Shechachianu, the blessing of time. And this is in accordance with the opinion of Rav and the conclusion of the Gemara. On the second night of the festival in the diaspora, because there's a second night outside of Israel, they only have only one night of full-fledged festival in Israel, 2 nights outside of Israel. On the second night of the festival outside Israel, some rule that the order of the last 2 blessings is reversed, and the blessing of time precedes the blessing of the Sukkah. But many of the later authorities disagree and maintain that the order recited on the first night is maintained on the second night as well. With regard to the blessings of Kiddush on Shabbos, when reciting Kiddush on Shabbos or on a festival, the blessing over wine is recited first, followed by the sanctification of the day. Now we skip a few paragraphs. The Gemara cites proof from that which we learned in a Mishnah. On Shavuos, the priest charged with the distribution of the showbread and the 2 loaves says to each priest, "Here is matzah for you, here is leavened bread for you." But here, where the chametz is primary and the matzah is subordinate to it, as it is the festival of Shavuos, when the 2 loaves of leavened bread are the offering of the day, and yet the Mishnah teaches, here is matzah for you, and here is leavened bread for you, it accords precedence to the showbread, which is distributed every week, over the obligation of the day, which is the leavened bread of Shavuos. And this is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rav, and we follow the opinion of Rabba bar Bar Chana in this. The Gemara actually we can skip that, and that is where we ended up. So now we know what the law is and why we have it that way. That concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Mishnah number 6, the final Mishnah here in Tractate Sukkah. In the case of a festival that occurs adjacent to Shabbos, both when it occurs preceding it and when it occurs following it. In other words, if the first day of Sukkot was on a Friday or on a Sunday, or Pesach, or Shavuos. So in the case of a festival that occurs adjacent to Shabbos, both when it's right before or right after, all of the priestly watches that arrived early or remained late to serve in the temple were of equal status in the distribution of the showbread on that Shabbos. In other words, normally on a regular Shabbos, right, the new priestly watch arrives and the old one finishes their service for the week, and the transition happens on Shabbos. When a festival is right near Shabbos, so that they're not going to have time, and you can't be traveling a long way or carrying stuff when it's a festival day, just like you can't on Shabbos. And it may be that they would need, like they were walking, right? So they couldn't get home. Let's say it's a 3-day journey for them. They're not going to be able to get home if they leave at the end of Shabbos and then get home in time for the festival. So instead, they would stay at the temple. And so there was a lot of extra priests around who were not serving during, it wasn't their week of service, but as a practical matter, they were included in it, because they were there and they should partake of the showbreads. Equal status in the distribution of the showbread on that Shabbos. If one day happened to separate between the festival and Shabbos, the watch whose time was scheduled would take 10 of the 12 loaves of showbread, and the watch that was detained after the festival because there was insufficient time to get home before Shabbos takes 2 loaves. And during the rest of the days of the year, when the changing of the watch takes place on Shabbos, the incoming watch takes 6 loaves and the outgoing watch takes 6 loaves. Rabbi Yehuda says the incoming watch takes 7 loaves and the outgoing takes 5. The standard procedure was that the members of the incoming watch divide the showbread in the north section of the courtyard, and the outgoing watch divide their showbreads in the south. However, there was one exception. The watch of Bilga, the family of Bilga, due to a penalty imposed upon that family, which always divide the showbread of its members in the south part of the courtyard, even when it is the incoming watch and should have had the honor of dividing the showbreads in the north. And its ring used to facilitate the slaughter of the animals was fixed in place, rendering it useless. And its niche among the niches in the wall of the chamber of knives, where the priests would store their knives and other vessels, was sealed. In other words, of the 24 watches, one group of Kohanim, of priests, who were all related to each other, this one family, were somehow disgraced, which we're going to read about. And for all time, they remained disgraced. It's really, it's tough, right? Like, all these priests, it wasn't even the fault of a priest necessarily, but the whole family ended up, having their status diminished vis-a-vis the other priests because of this incident for all time, or at least, until the destruction of the Second Temple, where it no longer mattered who the priestly watches were, because that was only relevant to service in the Holy Temple. But from the time of the incident, which happened, around the time of the Hanukkah story, which I think was about 100 and some odd years before the destruction of the Second Temple, maybe 150 years. And so for the rest of that period, this one family was disgraced, and they lost privileges during their week of service in the Holy Temple. And we'll hear why. That's Mishnah number 6. With regard to the distribution of the showbread, on Shabbos throughout the year, the incoming watch receives 6 loaves and the outgoing watch receives 6 loaves. On Shabbos during festivals, whether the Shabbat coincides with the festival day or whether it is on one of the intermediate days, and on Shabbos that occurs the day preceding or following the festival day, all the watches share equally in the loaves. If there is one day between the festival and Shabbos, the regularly scheduled outgoing watch receives 10 loaves and the incoming watch receives 2. Right? So the division is not entirely equal because it really is a matter of convenience that you're sort of helping those priests because they're really not due to serve that day. It's just that it would not make sense for them to try to get home in time. And so they get to partake a little bit, but not entirely with the priests who are serving at that time. We are at the top of the B side of page 56. The Gemara asks, and these 2 loaves received by the incoming watch, what is their purpose? And Rabbi Yitzhak says they are as compensation for locking the doors of the temple. And the Gemara asks, well, let the outgoing watch say to the incoming one, remove your claim to the extra loaves this week and divide the loaves equally, and next week's incoming watch will remove its claim next week. Why do you have to go through this complicated division? You could just say whoever is the watch serving that week gets all the loaves. So why do they make this division? And Abaye said, a ripe cucumber now is better than a pumpkin that has yet to ripen. A small immediate profit is preferable to a large potential profit. These days we say a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. So you could make a different division of these perks of the priests and just say, well, you'll get your whole share at the end of the week. Right now you get nothing. but that's not the way they divided it, that the incoming group, even if they were a few days early, would get a little bit of the showbreads. And certainly if they're coming in on time, they would get half the showbreads, and that's the way that they did it. And I love that expression, right? That a ripe cucumber now is better than a whole pumpkin, but it's not ripe yet, and you can never be sure that pumpkin will come to its full ripeness and end up being the larger vegetable in your hand. Who knows? Maybe it'll get stolen. Maybe it'll rot. Maybe something will happen. But you've got a ripe cucumber now. Eat, darling, eat. Okay, the Mishnah continues. Members of the incoming watch divide the showbread in the north section of the courtyard, and members of the outgoing watch in the south. And the sages taught in a baraisa, members of the incoming watch divide the showbreads in the north, which was an area of greater sanctity in the temple courtyard, so that it would be seen that they are incoming. And the members of the outgoing watch divide the showbread in the south, so that it would be seen that they are outgoing. The incoming watch gets a little bit more honor than the outgoing watch. Similar, it's not similar at all. This is such an unholy place. But when you take that tour of San Simeon, Howard Hughes's, vast mansion, they would describe how he had this very long rectangular dining table with all these VIP, movie star, rich people, magnate, famous people, guests. And when it was your first night at Howard Hughes's estate, not Howard Hughes, William Randolph Hearst, right? William Randolph Hearst. So your first night as his guest, you'd be down at his end of the table, either right next to him or at least right near him. Your second night, you find yourself in the middle of the long table. Your third night, you're down at the other end of the table. If you stay more than 3 nights, you're not even invited to dinner. A clear signal, it's time for you to go, right? So the incoming, the new ones, get more honor than the outgoing. We learned in the Mishnah that Bilga always divides the showbread in the south. That priestly watch of Bilga always divides in the south, even when it is the incoming watch. And the Gemara elaborates, the sages taught in a baraisa, there was an incident involving Miriam, the daughter of a member of the Bilga watch, who apostatized. And she went and married a soldier serving in the army of the Greek kings. It's not just that she didn't marry the type of people, of high honor that the daughter of a priest should marry. It's not just that she didn't marry a Jew, which any Jewish woman should marry a Jew. But even worse than all of that, she went and married a soldier serving in the army that was oppressing the Jews, right? This would be like a Jewish woman marrying a Nazi in the middle of World War II. Terrible, terrible thing that she did. And when the Greeks entered the sanctuary to desecrate it, she entered with them and was kicking with her sandal on the altar and said to the altar, "Wolf, wolf, until when will you consume the property of the Jewish people? And yet you do not stand with them when they face exigent circumstances." And after the victory of the Hasmoneans over the Greeks, that's the Hanukkah story, when the sages heard about this matter, and how she denigrated the altar, they fixed the ring of the Bilga watch in place so that they couldn't bring certain kinds of sacrifices, rendering it non-functional, and sealed its niche, that family's niche. They lost their locker privileges in the Chamber of the Knives. Now, it's kind of interesting when we think about exactly what she did. Not just that she married a soldier who was of the enemy, but then when she entered the sanctuary with him, now she doesn't belong in there. Only a priest could enter the sanctuary, and she's not a priest, even if she's the daughter of a priest. So she's violating all kinds of laws just to be there. But then she makes this really smart alecky comment to the altar saying, well, you keep eating the sacrifices, right, as if the altar eats, but it takes the sacrifices of the Jewish people. And then apparently it's not going to, help them when the war happens. They're going to be defeated in war. And here's the proof they're standing in the sanctuary when this happens. This is not so dissimilar right, to the kind of smart alecky, atheist, secularist, somebody who just kind of mocks religion and says, well, here's religion, taking and taking. All you people think, all these suckers who are practicing a religion, and they think that it's going to help them on the day of distress. And then that day comes, and they're going to the concentration camps, or they're being thrown to the lions, etc. And it's so easy to dismiss, the whole religion enterprise. So you can imagine that the sages would not have a lot of, mercy in their hearts for this woman who made this comment. However, even though this is really a rotten thing for her to have said, a disgraceful thing for her to have said, why should her father and all of his cousins and brothers and descendants and that whole priestly watch be humiliated and demoted in terms of their privileges in the Holy Temple? Now, some say that the watch, this group, was penalized for a different reason. It happened once that some members of the Bilga watch tarried in arriving at the temple. They were just late. They were lazy, they were slow, and they were late. And the members of the previous watch, the watch of Yeshivav, his brother, Bilga's brother, entered together with the members of the Bilga watch who had arrived and served in the place of the absent members of his brother's watch. And the Gemara notes, although neighbors of the wicked do not typically profit, according to the principle, woe unto the wicked and woe unto his neighbor, right? The wicked eventually will pay. They might get away with it for many years, but eventually the wicked will pay. And then if you just bought a house and live next to wicked people, beware, because when the retribution comes, you might get caught up in it, right? That's the idea. Woe unto the wicked, woe unto his neighbor. So Bilga's neighbors actually profited, as Bilga always divides the showbread in the south, even when the watch is incoming, and his brother Yeshivav always divides in the north, even when that watch is outgoing, right? The loss of Bilga's watch goes to the gain of the next watch, or the previous watch, who are going to always divide their showbreads in the north, the more honorable place. Now, the Gemara clarifies, granted, according to the one who said that Bilga was penalized because members of his watch were late in arriving at the temple, okay, that is why the entire watch is penalized. However, according to the one who said it is due to Miriam, the daughter of Bilga, who apostatized with the Greek soldier and then made offensive comments inside the sanctuary at the altar, actually, do we penalize the entire watch of Bilga because of his daughter? And Abaye said, yes, as people say, the speech of a child in the marketplace, which means in public, is learned either from that of his father or from that of his mother. Miriam would never have said such things had she not heard talk of that kind in her parents' home. Now, I think we can all agree that there's only so much control you can exert over your children, and they are going to hear and repeat things that they did not hear necessarily from you. And the best intentioned parents who are setting proper boundaries and are doing everything they can to be good parents can still produce offspring, that bring shame on a family. Of course it can happen. There's no guarantees. We do the best that we can as parents. And sometimes people are terrible parents, and the kids turn out fantastic anyway. There are no guarantees. However, I think it is a truism that, when young, especially young people, very young people, behave badly in the world, other people look at those kids and wonder about the parents. It might not be fair, but that's the way of the world. So I think actually a lesson that can be taken here is it is worth telling our children that their actions in public reflect on their family. And perhaps that might be a little bit of an extra, extra safety rails for them to remind them that it's not just them that they represent They represent their family, they represent their tribe, they represent their school, they represent their team, etc. And you don't want to reflect badly on the group of which you're a member. I remember I was on the rowing team in college, and when we had an away race, we wore coat and tie when we traveled because, you want to reflect properly on your team. Something worth noting. And now the last paragraph before we make our SIYUM on Tractate Sukkah. And the Gemara asks, and due to Miriam's father and mother, let's say, okay, her behavior is a bad reflection on her parents, but do we penalize an entire watch? What about the rest of the priests in that watch? Why do they suffer? And Abaye said, woe unto the wicked and woe unto his neighbor. Be careful who your neighbors are. To conclude the tractate on a positive note, the Gemara says, good for the righteous, good for his neighbor, right? So just like woe unto the wicked and woe unto his neighbor, well, good on the righteous and good on his neighbor. So if possible, move in next to a fine, upstanding group of people. Keep good company and you're more likely to encounter good fortune. As it is stated, Isaiah 3:10, say you of the righteous that it shall be good for him, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. The neighbors of a righteous man who witness and acknowledge the good that befalls that righteous man will benefit from their proximity to him. We shall return to you, Tractate Sukkah, and your glory is upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sukkah, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sukkah, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. The Torah learning that we do in this world stays with us. It's the one thing you can take with you to the next world. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that your Torah will be our avocation in this world and will accompany us in the world to come. And now we remember Bar Papa and his 10 sons who were all Torah scholars. Chanina Bar Papa, Ramai Bar Papa, Nachman Bar Papa, Achai Bar Papa, Abba Mari Bar Papa, Rafram Bar Papa, Rachish Bar Papa, Surchav Bar Papa, Ada Bar Papa, Daru Bar Papa, and Rabbi Papa himself, who merited to have 10 sons who were all sages. Please, Lord our God, make the words of our Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of your people, the house of Israel, so that we, our descendants, if one has grandchildren, he adds, and their descendants, and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, may all know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Your commandments make me wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. Let my heart be undivided in your statutes, in order that I may not be put to shame. I will never forget your precepts, for with them you have quickened me. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. Amen. 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 Selah, forever. We give thanks before you, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that you have placed our lot among those who sit in the study hall, and that you have not given our portion among those who sit idly on street corners. For we arise early and they arise early. We arise early to pursue matters of Torah, and they arise early to pursue frivolous matters. We toil and they toil. We toil and receive reward, and they toil and do not receive reward. We run and they run. We run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the pit of destruction. As it is stated, but you, God, will bring them down into the pit of destruction. Men of bloodshed and deceit shall not live out half their days. But as for me, I will trust in you. May it be your will, Lord my God, just as you have assisted me in completing Tractate Sukkah, so assist me to begin other tractates and books and conclude them, to learn and to teach, to observe and to perform and to fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. And may the merit of all the Tanaim, the rabbis of the Mishna, and the Amoraim, the rabbis of the Gemara, and the Torah scholars stand for me and my descendants, so that The Torah will not move from my mouth and from the mouths of my descendants and the descendants of my descendants forever. And may the verse, when you walk, it shall lead you. When you lie down, it shall watch over you. And when you awaken, it shall talk with you. Be fulfilled in me. For in the Torah your days shall be multiplied, and the years of your life shall be increased. Length of days is in her right hand, in her left are riches and honor. May the Lord give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. And we say, Amen. That concludes Tractate Sukkah. And because we just concluded it and we want to immediately start the new tractate, we're just going to read the first sentence of Tractate Beitzah. That's our next tractate. In the Koran, it shares a book with Tractate Rosh Hashanah. But first we have, I think, 40 pages of Beitzah, right? There would be 40 pages of Beitzah. And Beitzah is about the laws of festivals as distinguished from Shabbos. Now we've been studying about the particular laws of Sukkot, but Beitzah is about the laws that apply to all festivals and distinguish how we observe festivals from Shabbos. And it opens with a Mishna about Beitzah means an egg. And we open with the law of an egg that a rooster laid on a festival day. May we eat it. It just came into existence that day. With regard to an egg that was laid on a festival, Beis Shammai say it may be eaten even on that day, and Beis Hillel say it may not be eaten. Right? That's a case where Beis Hillel, who usually offer the more lenient opinion, here they have the more stringent opinion, and we will see why when we continue Tractate Beitzah tomorrow. Okay, my friends, it is a custom that we have a little celebration when we have made a SIYUM. So I hope you'll join me with your favorite beverage. Nina and I and the kids were in Costa Rica this summer, and we brought home some 25-year-old rum. So I'm going to be using that for my l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shakol nihiyeh b'divaro. And I said, blessed are you, Lord, our God, ruler of the universe, by whose word everything comes into being. Then I tasted it because I made a bracha. And now I can wish you, my friends, and everyone who's been studying with us in this journey and just completed Tractate Sukkah, l'chaim, to life. And just so we can make another bracha, another blessing, I've got a Ritz cracker here. And so this will be a Mizonos blessing. I'll say it in English first. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who makes the various kinds of nourishment. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei Mizonos. And when you have a grain product, but that is not bread, that's when you make a Mizonos. And after I sign off, I'll have to make the after blessing, which is called Al HaMichir. Bless, it's like the grace after meals, but it's a much shortened version because I didn't have a meal. But because I ate a grain product, it's one of the 7 fruits of Israel. That's why I'll be saying that blessing. The 7 foods that characterize the beauty of Israel. That's one of them, and so we make that Al HaMichir blessing afterward. All right, let me come to your questions and comments. Are there questions and comments? Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong document. Here we go. Sunday at 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern, Nina will be doing her annual Rosh Hashanah show from Nina's Kitchen. I know she's got some really special dishes planned this year, and she'll be showing you how she makes them. So that's something you definitely don't want to miss, especially if you're interested in really good food. That's Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific. You'll be live on Facebook. Renee, my lulav set is missing per Amazon. Is it kosher to take bets on whether the replacement will arrive in time for the festival? Oy vey. Well, I just pray that it does arrive for you. It probably doesn't matter whether you make a bet or not, since I assume it's just a friendly wager, and you're being facetious more than anything. But Renee, may you receive your 4 species in time for Sukkot. I didn't even know you could order that from Amazon. We're very blessed. I mean, here we have a big and thriving Jewish community in LA. So I always buy my lulav and esrog. I mean, in fact, there's probably 10 different places where I could buy it. And I have friends who run some of those stores. And so I can really, engage in choosing and looking at all the different esrogim. And they even tie it for me right there. And, you have a choice. You could tie it in the Chabad way or in the standard way. So thank you for reminding me how blessed we are that we can do that, right here in town and have that kind of choices. And Renee, may you receive your full set in time for the festival. Bill, fun fact about my seminary consortium, the Graduate Theological Union. Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, that I mentioned earlier, wanted to build a second, even bigger palace where, I guess, Bill's school stands up at Berkeley. And his mother, however, decided that San Simeon, where he built Hearst Castle, was a horribly tacky thing which she wouldn't want wished on the Bay Area, and forced him to give it to her instead. And he'd only completed the front porch by then, the ruins of which are still there. Wow, I never heard that story before. Thanks so much, Bill. And PK, since a Jew married a Nazi, not literally, didn't this exclude her from the Jewish religion? So, no, right? You could be excommunicated the way that Acher was excommunicated. There is that. But you're still a Jew, right? So she wouldn't cease to be a Jew, but if you did something like, you became a literal enemy of the Jewish people, certainly the community wouldn't want to deal with you until you'd made a serious atonement. She would remain a Jew, but, here we are thousands of years later remembering the scandal and how it plagued not only her, but her whole family. Who knows? Perhaps later in her own lifetime, she made a teshuvah. I don't know. But the fact is, a Jew, no matter what he does, remains a Jew. And Acher himself, Elisha ben Abuya, the sage who went bad, the other sages would never speak to him again. And would shun him, but his student, Rabbi Meir, the great Rabbi Meir, knew that his teacher, was a great and holy man inside, and something made him go bad, but Rabbi Meir never turned his back on his teacher, and continued to respect him and defer to him, pay him some honor, not repeat teachings in his name, no longer, learn Torah from him, but not shun him in that absolute way. We see something similar with Eliezer was excommunicated, and not for turning his back on the Jewish people and doing something that was really wicked. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, in the story of the oven of Achna, which we talked about before, and we'll get to about halfway through our 7.5-year journey, he came into a kind of political conflict with Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, the Sanhedrin at that time, which caused, you can't have feuding leadership. So Rabban Gamliel excommunicated Rabbi Eliezer, and the other sages were forced to stop visiting with and learning from Rabbi Eliezer, which was immensely painful to him and to his students. That's a very painful episode. But Rabbi Akiva eventually did go to visit him and did honor him. And we remember many, many, many teachings of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So just a little bit of background on that. Okay, my friends. Did I say a rooster laid an egg? Roosters don't lay eggs. But if a hen laid an egg during the holiday, Would it be permitted to eat it? That's the topic we'll take up tomorrow. Have a great night. It's been wonderful to celebrate the SIYUM on Tractate Sukkah with you. And with God's help tomorrow, we'll open our journey through volume 8 of the Talmud, Beit Sar. All the best.